Welcome to On the X. My guests today are Randy Hetrick and Jack Daly, two leaders at the helm of one of the most recognized names in functional fitness, TRX. Randy's a former Navy SEAL who first rigged together the prototype for the TRX suspension trainer using a jiu-jitsu belt and parachute webbing while deployed overseas. What started as a way to stay mission ready in tight spaces turned into a global fitness brand. After earning his MBA from Stanford, Randy launched TRX in 2004 and served as CEO for over 15 years. Jack Daly is the current CEO and owner of TRX. A private equity veteran with experience at Goldman Sachs and TPG Capital, Jack holds an MBA from Wharton and has a lifelong passion for fitness. He saw in TRX not just a business opportunity, but a mission worth backing. He is also a former board member at the Navy SEAL Foundation and a huge supporter of the NSW community. Together, they've relaunched TRX with renewed energy, focusing on innovation, digital content, education for trainers, and direct-to-consumer growth. So here we go with Randy Hetrick and Jack Daly on the X. So let's just start with how'd this come about, right? This kind of like TRX 2.0, whatever you want to call it, this marriage between you guys. How'd this come about? What spurred this marriage, so to speak?
Well, I'll start because chronologically, that's how it worked. I had sold controlling interest to TRX to a private equity company back right at the beginning of 2019, and stayed on with them through the end of 2020, at which point I left, and we can talk more about that later. And I went on to basically spin an idea that I've been working on for years, thinking about, into a new company. And I was, kind of getting in the early stages of getting started with that and getting it up and running. And I started, hearing not so good things coming from inside TRX. And then that got worse and worse as 12 months turned into 24. And about, 18 months into it, 20 months into it, I became pretty clear that it was not going to go well, and that they were going to ultimately crater the business, and there was going to be an opportunity. And through another buddy who I know Brad Treadway. Treadway had been, yapping in my ear for a while, saying like, "Hey, do you know Jack Daly?" And I won't tell the entire way that he framed it, but both of you guys living in San Francisco, you ought to know each other, right? And I said, no, I don't. And then he made an introduction. Jack and I met, started talking, and then as the months went by, things got worse at TRX. And ultimately, I knew that Jack had retired, which I kind of laugh at even the notion of associating Jack Daly with retirement. And he's a fitness freak, and there was going to be an opportunity maybe to come in and buy my baby back. And so I reached out to Jack at some point, and he may remember the details better than me. It was a chaotic time, and said like, "Hey, I got an idea for you to kick around." And that was literally like the genesis of it.
That's
right?
it, right?
And you pick up from there. And
So Chris, from my perspective, here I know Randy, right? To know Randy is to love Randy. Great dude, having fun. And he calls up, he's like, "Hey, some private equity guys still go to my company. I don't think it's going well. They're doing a financing." So I was helping a buddy out by taking a meeting because, look, 25 years on Wall Street, I'd met with multiple management teams doing financings, that kind of thing. And I had retired from Wall Street, but I was investing my own money in lifestyle-related businesses. So I said, sure, I'll do a meeting. I called the bankers, say, "Hey, I'll take a look." And I called him, and I had to have that really awkward conversation with a friend and say, "Look, I think they're going to run out of cash in about 4 weeks. And you got to protect yourself." That's the bad news, right? Well, the good news is I'm on this journey of, I'd left Wall Street to decide to focus on health, wellness, and happiness and invest in my lifestyle, investing my own money instead of somebody else's. And I said, well, so the bad news is I think they're going to go through a really tough time. The good news is maybe we team up and buy the company and take to the next level. And that's exactly how it played out. Now, you have those kind of conversations lots of times, And as an investor, you look at lots of different things. Very few of them actually get to a deal. And in this case, the company had gotten itself in trouble. They ran out of cash. They had to go through a bankruptcy process because of that. But Randy and I were able to come in and buy the company out of bankruptcy and then completely rebuild the business back to, bringing Randy back in. I felt like we were pretty well prepared to do that. So that's how it worked out.
So let me ask this then in that, like what I think for this episode, obviously there's an interest in TRX just in general, and I think what's going on there, but I specifically think of entrepreneurs and business owners, and right, like there's just so many lessons learned from a story like this of like what went well, what didn't go well, right? What were the mistakes that led the company to this position where this had to happen? Like Randy, what was going on? What are the lessons learned from that put you guys in this position where it was like, hey, we're going to run out of cash? Like, what was the decisions that were made that led to that? Where if you could go back, you'd be like, I wouldn't do that again.
Well, I mean, it's a story that plays out a lot with, particularly I think with smaller companies and smaller PE groups. I think it's a little different than maybe some of the larger, large cap stuff, which was Jack's wheelhouse. When the transaction happened, we had to recap out a previous private equity group that had been around for 6 or 7 years, and it was just time to exit them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when, it never really occurred to me, I look back in retrospect and think like, I don't know why I didn't focus more on control, because I had always had, massive control. Like I had, complete control of the business, and never once ever had to flex to use it. Not once, not one time. It was always like, it didn't mean we agreed on everything. We'd get in there as a board and hash things out, but there was never a time ever where I said, let me tell you, goddamn, let me remind you who's in charge. I never had to do that ever. And so I didn't realize how important it can be. And what happened was, the dynamics of the deal were such that in order to preserve, my common shareholders and raise enough money to exit the previous guys, I had to sell control. And I sold control to guys who didn't have any operating experience, which is not uncommon in these circumstances. I think in bigger companies, it's less impactful because they're so deep and they've got, such a bench that it's very different. The investors generally don't get as deeply involved in the operations. But in a smaller company, right, there's this weird sort of psychology that they should, even though they may not have any reps as operators. And that's what happened here. And, because ironically, we went from when I exited at the end of October in 2020, on the heels of the pandemic, we had our biggest year ever, right? We did almost 90 million in revenue and 21 million in EBITDA. So the business was extremely healthy, despite having had the pandemic that we were dealing with, right? And having to navigate that. But, then at that point, I think it really was an issue of lack of experience and making some bad calls. And I was outside the business at that point, looking back in and not really able to help other than, just to seem like a sour grapes guy. And it just compounded on itself and went bad like really quickly. And, they got way out over their skis and, had levered up the company with a bunch of debt, had the wrong kinds of inventory. There was a lot of problems, but I guess I think the lesson that I take away from it is, number one, really trying to get profitable, stay profitable so you don't ever have to take outside capital is a good idea. If you take outside capital, you really need to be aware of, first of all, matching the right kind of capital to that business. Because if you bring somebody in who has, stratospheric tech return expectations on a business that doesn't have that kind of potential, it could be a great business, great profitable business, but maybe not going to deliver, even under the best of circumstances, 100x, at that stage in its life cycle, then right there you're misaligned, right? So really making sure that you have the right investor mapped to the right kind of business. And then I think, I think from the investor perspective, it's really easy to come in and think that sitting on boards is the same thing as running companies. And I mean, Jack certainly is in a unique position right now, having sat on giant boards for his whole career, and now coming in and running, a small company, to comment on that, because they're definitely not the same thing.
Yeah, for
right?
sure. Yeah. I think, it's that. I think back on my own kind of entrepreneurial journey, and there definitely is a thing, I think, when you are a young entrepreneur or even a seasoned entrepreneur, where you can get really excited about an investment and money coming in, and like, oh, somebody's excited about our business. And I think sometimes because of that, there can be a little bit of like, hey, we're going to go too fast with this thing. We're really not going to, we're not going to, like, to your point, like, let's really vet the partner we're bringing on board here and exactly what their role is. I think it's a super common pitfall, just because obviously, like, you're excited, okay, we're going to grow this business and all this kind of stuff. And I saw that in my own journey for sure. So Jack, coming into this, like you said, if we're 4 weeks away from, like, hey, no money, like, what was the thing that really made you want to do this deal? Like, what excited you about it? What did you see as the potential? Because this is a brand too that's, already been around for what, 15 years or so, 16 years, something like that, right? Like a well-established brand. And that can be really challenging to do if a brand has done really, really well, and for some reason, there's been a drop off or whatever, like, some decisions that weren't great, or a partner that came in that wasn't awesome. That can be hard to write, right? So, like, what are you looking at and saying, yep, I can do this, and I think we can turn this around?
Well, let me give a quick perspective on my view of what happened. It happened to many companies. You have a number of entrepreneurs in the SEAL community, might be
for sure
them. During COVID, the numbers blew out, as Randy said. And what happens is, when that happens, you have to think about where they're going and not just say, well, it's here, so next year has to be 20% more. What happened to TRX, they had a blowout year because of dislocation in the economy that caused everybody to spend whatever it takes for fitness products, is now stuck at home.
Right.
And so they projected the next year to be 20% higher, when the reality is that was a moment in time. It was going to go back to normal.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Anyways, that happened to every company, right? Everybody went through some version of that. TRX had a capital structure issue. They also, when it started going back down, the company spent a lot of money advertising to try to manufacture sales that just didn't exist. And so they spent themselves into a problem. The company didn't have any foundational issues. The product's great, the brand is great, the ecosystem's strong. They just spent themselves out of money and didn't anticipate it going back to a normal level. And so they spent too much, and then they had a capital structure they couldn't attract more capital in. So that's my perspective on kind of what got the company into trouble, on top of Randy's perspective on the people who are involved. Now, what attracted me to this was, so here I am for 25 years, I took over large companies, and I'm on this journey of health, wellness, and happiness. And you really want to have an impact on the world. TRX, what Randy's been able to build, and we're a 20-year-old brand, what Randy's been able to build from selling suspension trainers out of his car to personal trainers into a global ecosystem of, started off with personal trainers. The company has qualified trainers around the world, over 300,000 trainers around the world. 2/3 of them are outside the US. This is a truly global fitness brand and a truly global fitness company. It has intellectual property, patents protecting our core products that are tried, tested, litigated. So we have an IP moat around what makes TRX special. Plus, we have a brand that Randy's been able to create that is known all around the world. So the value of that brand, the community of people who are excited by TRX, the quality of the products, those are foundational. So he built it the old-fashioned way. He didn't decide he wants to start a brand and, raise $100 million, have a Super Bowl ad and name a stadium, and then go out of business the next year. He actually built it over a long period of time by providing quality products and services. So from my perspective, and then our perspective, we have a couple other people involved, it was this iconic brand, great set of products, great ecosystem that needed some tender love and care on the operations side to get back to where we are today with growth prospects going forward that make this very attractive.
And as I understand it, I read this, you weren't looking to be the CEO. You just,
He
right?
made, no,
That's
he-
what I read, that Randy basically made you be the CEO. So how'd that happen?
very true story.
Well, so I couldn't be, right? I was neck deep in this startup, and because of the way the whole thing worked out with the collapse, I wasn't in a position to just buy it myself. So I knew Jack was going to have to come in with the capital. I'm the guy who built Humpty Dumpty, right? So pieces, but I know how they fit back together, right? Mostly. And so between the two of us, it was like, all right, that's actually a pretty formidable capability right there. And the, I'm sorry, what was it? Where we
Just
started
like
this?
Jack wasn't going to be the CEO, right?
Critical part of the story. So I knew Jack well enough at that point to know, like, all right, I've now worked with enough of these investors, right, over the years. And I knew I was sort of getting the intensity that drives him. And I thought, all right, well, I can't do it, right? And even if I can, I don't know if I want this guy up my rear like every single day. True. But I can't. And there's definitely nobody else that's going to be able to step in and not just sort of get melted. But if Jack steps in and I can help him, the other guys on the board can help him, right? Fill in some of the operational gaps that he may have, then he's going to actually get it in a way that a founder gets it, right? You see things sometimes happening that an objective view from the board seat just doesn't reveal. But because you're driving it every day with all the people, the team, you see the things that other people don't see, and that keeps you in the game when, objectively, somebody sitting as a backbencher might not see that. So I started trying to persuade him, and his first answer was like, I don't do that. That's not what I do. And I went to one of our board members, Mark Fields, who, by the way, I saw in the airport last night, who ran Ford and who I knew Jack has immense respect for. And I started whispering in Mark's ear, saying like, all right, the only guy that can do this, right, is Jack. And he doesn't want to do it. But here's the case. And Mark looked at it and said, normally I would disagree with you, but in this case, I totally agree with you. And so then Mark started from the other side, and we kind of squeezed him from both sides. And he said, all right, I'll do it, but if I'm not doing a good job, then you guys got to fire me. And we said, all right, deal.
Well, so here's my perspective, Chris. So just background, I spent the 25 years on Wall Street. Before that, I taught mechanical engineering. I was on faculty for 6 years.
And I did not know this about you, Jack. This was something brand new that I learned about you.
Professor days, I know. But I also built companies in Cleveland during my 20s. And I went to buy a company and realized people buy and sell companies for a living. That's what caused me to go to Wall Street. So I got to Wall Street in my early 30s after having built businesses and taught engineering for the decade of my 20s. So anyway, I had a little bit of a history in it. When Randy comes to me and says, oh, Jack, with your intention, you're going to kill anybody else in that seat. And I said, oh, Randy, but let me tell you, what I do is I control companies. I get the best person in the world to come in and run. He goes, no, but you'll kill anybody else in that seat. I said, well, maybe. So we'll have to keep me in check. But I'm not the right person to do it. I'm very self-aware, right? I'm just not the best person to do this. And so I said, no. And I used probably colorful language saying no. Then Mark Fields, like Randy said, Mark Fields calls me and says, Jack, you got to run the company. Now, Mark did run Ford. He was a Fortune 10 size company CEO. He also came out of the marketing department at Ford. So he knows more about marketing than I do. And it's all about having a good team around you. And I said, Mark, when he left Ford, he joined my team at TPG. I said, how many boards have you sat on with me? You know what I do for a living. He goes, yeah, but Jack, with your intention, you're going to kill anybody else in that seat. And so I recognize that I have two people telling me, but I also recognize I have two world-class CEO coaches. So I said, okay, you're making me do this. I don't agree that I'm the best person to do it, but that's okay. We'll find out. I'm willing to do it. You two have to coach me, but I control the company, even though they're investors in the business. But any one of the three of us can fire me at any time if we find somebody better or if I don't perform, or both, right? So that's how we agreed to do this. Now, in hindsight, Chris, rebuilding this company was a 24/7 effort, and they were exactly right. I couldn't get a daily update or a weekly update from somebody else sitting in this seat. I had to sit there and see all the cockroaches running around and killing them as we go, and just overall building the team and fixing the business. So once again, having a good team around you is really important. They knew that better than I did. I listened to them. We did it. I'm not the best CEO in the world, and I'm not the best CEO necessarily for this, but in this situation, under those circumstances, I was the right solution, and I've learned along the way.
What
So
else
I
were you
think
gonna? What else were you gonna do anyways? Were you just playing golf and doing BJJ or what?
I point.
Look, I know. You'd think at 59 years old, I could find something else to do with my time. I'm working like a Goldman Sachs analyst around the clock.
But it's also a different thing, right? It's not like you went out and raised a fund to do this. You bought it with your own money,
Oh, yeah.
right? Yeah, this is your own purchase, like a personal purchase here. So what were the things? So collaboratively then, okay, Jack comes on board, new CEO, Randy, you're the chairman, right? That's your title, kind of whatever you
Yes.
want to, however that works exactly. What were then let's call it 3 things that it was like, we got to fix these things, right? Was it, because obviously you're coming from slightly different perspectives. Randy's got a lot of time under his belt at the company. Jack, you've got kind of the outsider looking in, done a lot of deals on Wall Street. What was it? Was it personnel? Was it supply chain? Is it, something else? Is it, hey, we got to expand our offerings? Like, what were those things?
So, number 1, build a team. We exited 9 of the top 10 people right away.
Wow.
So-
Wow. Really?
So just let that settle in, right? So we built a team immediately.
Whoa.
And so that was the most important part of this. We had to keep the operations going. We had to go through that bankruptcy process, make all of that work. But we had to start with foundationally building a team. We lovingly refer to the team as a team of Avengers we brought in. We brought in some world-class people from the company, like Randy and a couple of others, and then people from outside, people I've worked with in multi-billion-dollar businesses that have come together with the stated mission of taking this iconic company and bringing it to the next level. So team was clearly
Number one.
Okay.
And I'll say the second you can add. Second was re-engage and light up the ecosystem. Those 300,000 plus certified trainers worldwide, we have people out there who have TRX tattooed on their bodies, and they love the brand. And you have IP, which is important. You have the people who are in the company, but then you have this whole ecosystem. And we wanted to show the love to that ecosystem, because that's one of the most valuable parts of TRX is that community. So we started doing summits all over the world. Summits are gatherings for 2 days of people who are very enthusiastic about TRX, who are professional trainers, and they come together. We upskill their skills, both in training as well as in business. And what it does is it just reignites that ecosystem, that culture around the world. So re-engaging the ecosystem was also
and that was, I'll double tap that one, because that was critical. I think one of the mistakes that happens a lot in sort of finance-driven leadership perspectives, right, is that you look at what's tangible asset, but one of the really, really important things in consumer businesses is the brand, right? And the brand isn't just like your logo, right? It's the way that someone looks at the company, feels about the company. And that's something that very often ends up getting short shrift when a company's under pressure, right? And that had definitely happened at TRX. One of the, I would say our strongest asset up until that point had been the, not just the internal team, it was the 2 or 3 rings, concentric rings around the company that are instructors, and then those fitness pros who had gone through courses and fallen in love with the brand, and then the people who they touched, right? And that's something that's an intangible, but hugely important to a company that does fitness or any other really like high touch consumer product. So we had to spend some real time and energy on that, because that had largely been pushed aside as the company had, been sort of headed toward financial trouble. We had to go back and reignite that. And that, that's one of those things that's kind of easy to say you're going to do, actually pretty hard to do.
But you guys get this. Navy SEALs understand the value of culture, unlike almost everybody else on the planet, right? And so it's just a part of your nature, but it's not necessarily for regular business people. So that was number 2, is really focusing on the global culture. And then number 3 was process and operations. And, having Mark Fields from Ford, a Frank McGuigan from Transplace, Dan Tiemann from KPMG, we have world-class, a Woody from Nike, ran global warehousing for Nike. We have world-class people coming in here focused on the stuff that's not sexy. We run a sexy fitness company that's branded. We got to the plumbing, electrical, the structural work of the company. We completely transformed the supply chain, completely. We completely rebuilt the tech stack. Completely. We completely rebuilt the marketing team, the sales engine, all of the stuff that's behind the wall that nobody sees. We had to rebuild that while we kept this global business running. And it is the proverbial, repairing an aircraft while it's in flight.
Yeah.
So for that foundational rebuild, so that was number 3, operational excellence, which just hadn't been that closely paid attention to. So that was the third. And I will add the fourth is begin to think about, but we had to get those first 3 done first, the growth vectors for the company, which, by the way, we have some pretty exciting growth vectors, but we had some rebuilding to do. And we did acquire, while we were doing all that, we acquired a company called Weibel, which, by the way, I'm a deal guy, so I buy companies for a living for 25 years. And we have this world-class board, and you'll test this. I got the board together and say, if I go up to the bar and I order a vodka, don't give it to me. If I come in with a deal while we're going through this rebuild, just say no. Even though I control the company, just say no. 9 months into it, we find a company called Weibel that's a perfect fit for us. Get the board together and say, okay, your job is to tell us why we shouldn't buy this company. So we did an acquisition while we were going through that foundational rebuild, because obviously the future for TRX is growth, and growth through things that we develop in-house, but also we'll add things as needed.
So,
And don't forget, we built an HQ and relocated everybody.
Oh yeah.
oh,
And
right.
then-
Yeah, because you're in Delray Beach, right, in Florida now.
Yeah.
So talk, because that's exactly where I was going to go. Talk about what the verticals are, the channels of growth, right? Because I think when a lot of people that do not have TRX tattooed on their chest, literally, most people know TRX. I think anybody does some measure of fitness, I think if they were, asked what's TRX, they would know what it is. But what they think is the suspension trainer, right? They think they sort of the original product for the most part. But obviously you have to expand on that. There's some measure of business. It's like we want to sell as many of these units as possible, but at some point you got to do other stuff if you want to keep growing. So talk about that. Like, what are the growth channels? I know you guys have an app. I know that there's obviously other products like the Weibel and things like that. There's the kind of trainers. Like, what are those channels, and how do you figure out how much to put into them too? Because one of my big learnings from my limited experience in entrepreneurship at Killcliff was you can run the risk of going a mile wide and an inch deep and things failing, right? Where you don't get enough of a foothold on your core product and you lose sight of that. And that was a problem for us, for sure. Like, we got into bars and coffee and the stuff that we should have been focused on the core product. So how do you determine where to go? Where are you going? And how do you see that kind of like shaping things? How do you make those decisions?
Let me start here, and then, because this one can be fairly expansive, right?
For sure. Yeah. Take it wherever you want to go with it.
One of the interesting things that you think is an asset, which is we became the Kleenex, right? Of
yeah.
strap.
Yes. Right.
And that was really improbable, right? Like, when I first came into the industry, the concept that that club owners were gonna be ripping out banks of fixed cardio machines to put in this crazy frame with a bunch of straps hanging from it, like, there was zero probability that was going to happen, and yet it did. Well, we became synonymous. Even knockoff straps get called TRXs. That's great, except we also had to overcome the sort of the perception that that's all that we're about, because that clearly is what we're about. And still today, and for a long time into the future, we'll be, God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be the dominant makers of suspension training. But we have a broad set of functional training tools. Anything a trainer would train you with, Chris, right? We make pretty much. We've stopped short of machines, right? When you get into selectorized plate machines or cardio machines, we've stopped short of that so far. but we've created an ecosystem of products that we will extend now and forever, I hope, into in innovative new ways into the future. But, right, the world marches forward and technology becomes a bigger and bigger part of the fitness recipe that everyone wants to consume. So clearly we have to start to look into ways to embrace technology in the products that we make. And that takes us, and we also want to bring along, because we don't want to lose what brung us, right? The trainers of the world who we've served maybe better. I mean, we became the largest provider of professional education of anybody in the industry, but we were known for the straps. But our education went way beyond the straps. So we want to continue that legacy, continue to educate pros, because there's an enormous amount of goodness that comes from doing that, right? With them as your ambassadors to the world, to athletes, to regular folks, in and out of gyms. So education continues to be part of our mix, along with building, great functional training products. But we're also looking forward. I'll hand the baton over to Jack. So I don't monopolize the stage.
No, not at all. But that's the first place is our products, right? And Randy, I'm sitting next to the guy who's created one of the greatest training tools in the world, right? But he's also done them multiple times. We have other training tools that Randy's created. The Bandit. He's developed the Rip Trainer. He's developed a number of other things commercially as well. So new products in functional training. We will stay in the functional training space. That's where we're a leader, and we'll continue to do that. But we also have our services. So our service offering, as Randy mentioned, is our education. We train tens of thousands of trainers on a regular basis around the world. So our innovative and tried and true education services for trainers, we'll continue to grow that. We provide programming to gyms, whether they're studio gyms or large, big box gyms. So fitness programming is another area that we can continue to innovate. So we have our service offering, we have our product offering, and then we have our digital offering. Our digital offering right now, we have a terrific app. The attachment rate for somebody who buys our gear is very high, and the conversion from your 30 days free to a paid service is also very high, because you can do so many different workouts on our app. By the way, sidebar, Navy SEAL Admiral Bob Harvard's legendary Bob workout in our app. You can come in, work out with Admiral Harvard for an hour and a half, and just and have the glory of working out with
Right.
Admiral.
Yes. You and I have
so-
done it numerous times together.
I know, yeah, Chris. I think about you once in a while when I'm getting my head.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Well, we have an app that also gives us that ability to move into more of a connected fitness ecosystem. So you could expect to see from us a connected fitness ecosystem in the functional training space. That's pretty exciting. And so we're developing that as we go. So we have our products, our education and services and programming, our digital experience. All of those are good growth vectors for us. We also then can do brand extensions. I'd say look for us to get into related businesses over the years to come, because we do have a great brand. Randy's built credibility in the industry. We will only do things that are really appropriate for TRX at a TRX quality level. So we have brand extension opportunities, which, by the way, now that we're coming up on 3 years and going through the rebuild and the redo, it's taken most of those 3 years to get to a place where we can now sit back and think strategic thoughts and think about, okay, those next offerings, because we're not just, fixing the plumbing, the electrical, and everything else of the house.
And what's nice is that because of the platform at this point, we have, in my view, brand equals one thing, right? It's trust. And we have a trusted relationship with our customers. So because of that, and the platform that we have with the ability to produce product, create content around them, and sell, we also are attracting, I guess we've been doing this for a while, but we're attracting other product owners, right? The Rip was the first one that we ever did this way. The Rip Trainer was fairly early in the company, maybe 10 years in, that we had some guys come to us with basically a pre-market, idea, and we have the platform to bring it to market. So we did. We're now in a really good position now to do that. We've got other products right now that are in that pipeline. So we will, I think we'll create some new stuff because we have a really good view of the training landscape and we can see opportunities, and we'll acquire some stuff that's out there that maybe is a great product, but single product companies today, really hard to make go. Really, really. I mean, I got very lucky with the timing on just kind of being ahead of the explosion of e-commerce and having enough time to get up and going and to protect, the intellectual, have some intellectual property and be able to protect it. Because, man, today, bringing a single product to market and making that successful is really, really hard.
How did you do that, by the way? Because, I think of when I was at Killcliff, like a drink is hard to completely replicate, right? As a knockoff. That's difficult to do. You might make something that's sort of the same, but like the blend is proprietary and it's hard to, you can't sort of reverse engineer that all that well. But something like the suspension trainer, that's a really easy product for someone to just be like, I'm going to make a cheap knockoff and sell that on Amazon or whatever. And that's true for a lot of products. And that's a very challenging thing for a lot of entrepreneurs. They might have a really cool idea, but it's like, well, if I put this out on the market, someone's just going to make a cheap ripoff of it and people are just going to buy that. So how did you protect it to prevent that? And I'm sure you had people that were making copies of it, but how did you, prevent them from taking over the market?
Well, fortunately, that was like one of the ridiculous, it seemed preposterous at the time, the amount of money that I spent on some of the innovative features, patenting them.
Yeah.
Right. And I can remember having all kinds of debates about whether it was a good idea or not a good idea. Because if a product doesn't become very popular, then spending money to protect it is a bad idea. Right. However, presumably, you don't go into business assuming that your product might sell a few. You go into business with, the best steely-eyed view of success. And if you are successful, especially today, and you don't protect the intellectual property around it, then you're cooked. Because in the world of e-commerce, right, honestly, you have knockoffs within 2 weeks of bringing products to market sometimes. So, we litigated. We litigated the ones that were important. We won, some really important cases, and partnered with some of the big platforms. Amazon, was a great partner. And once we had litigated our IP, they then enforced it. And Amazon is one of the big platforms where knockoffs go to live, right? And so,
what's in that for Amazon? I'm curious. What's the upside for Amazon to do that for you?
Amazon wants to have a platform that is trusted.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you allow a platform where, intellectual property is not respected.
Sure. All right. Yeah. Yep.
Knockoffs can be really dangerous.
They don't want to enable scumbags. That's at the end of the day. But what a lot of entrepreneurs don't get that Randy got very early on is the benefit, because it costs a lot of money. Randy spent $3 million in a litigation in 2015 or 16, got a $15 million judgment against the scumbag infringer, but that person bankrupted themselves. So you were out $3 million. And now we have litigated patents, which obviously are very valuable, because then you don't have to go through the courts to validate them again. But this company has had a long history. And by the way, we spend millions of dollars a year on IP protection, yet we also regularly get, from people who do infringe, 7-figure, judgments against them, 8-figure judgments against them. So if you are a scumbag and you do infringe, we take people down all over the world, and many times it's going to come with a check, a big one, hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars.
Yeah, I think the big lesson there though is like right from the get-go, if you believe in your product, get it protected, right? Like that's huge.
Yeah. You have to today. It's so fast. The market's so fast. And there are people who will do anything to make a buck. Part of why we enforce is because knockoffs can be really dangerous. These guys use, instead of, aircraft grade aluminum, they use pot metal, right? And so, there have been every single time that we get any kind of initial outreach for a personal injury, it turns out it's from a counterfeit, and we know because we have unique serial numbers on all of our products. And it turns out that it's some knucklehead who was trying to save 50 or 60 bucks by buying a knockoff and taking it into a gym as usually a trainer who takes it in and ends up hurting a client, right? Because in the middle of a steep row, all of a sudden the carabiner or one of the adjusters explodes. That's not a good experience, right? So we in part enforce, because we got to protect the market and we want people to understand the difference between, the stuff we make. I mean, we've never had a single, not a single carabiner the entire time the company's ever been in existence has failed. Well, that's because we take great pains. I mean, imagine, Chris, a climbing carabiner. You're going to go like buy knockoff climbing carabiners to,
Yeah, no. No.
So, those are the kinds of things that we try to protect our customers from.
What is, so what's success look like for you guys now? Like, as you look to the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that is there an end state there? Is there like, we want to get to this finish line? I mean, I don't think there's an acquisition in the future, but like an IPO, or is it, what is it? What are you guys looking at right now?
I like to hear Jack's view of this.
Yeah, I'm curious too.
Honestly, Chris, I spent 25 years with a 5-year clock.
Right.
Because I would use other people's money to take over companies, and I'd tell them 5 years, plus or minus, whatever it takes for us to give you a great return. In this case, this is a lifestyle for us, right? Taking an iconic brand and being able to spread the goodness and the happiness all over the world. Like, how do I describe success? That's success. We had 1,000 people gather in Athens, Greece last year for 2 days of training. We did a Guinness Book of World Record event. Average age was 28 years old. It was unbelievable, lit up our ecosystem. Everybody's, having the time, improving not only themselves, but everybody around them, because they're learning how to teach other people how to lead, happy, healthier, more fit lives. So from one perspective, we've already achieved success because we've taken this great iconic brand and we've really juiced it up. And now we're spreading this goodness around the world even better than they did before. Now that's success. From what's the financial target? There's no financial target, right? We're doing what we're doing, and we don't have any debt on the company. It's just us, right? It's a bunch of people who have come together with a mission to take this beautiful business and make it better, right? And so that's what we're doing. So for us, I can't tell you what ultimately was going to happen, but we're just going to keep creating value in the business, and we'll keep growing the company, and the rest of the things will take care of themselves. The good thing is we don't have a clock ticking. We don't have investors waiting on the other side for something. Now, that doesn't mean we don't provide liquidity and wealth creation opportunities for people involved in the business. We certainly do that because that's the trade you make with people who come together in a venture like this. But for us, let's just keep doing what we're doing. I mean, that's really it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Talk a little more about the community aspect of this, because this is a big thing that I've talked about a number of times. But so I'm gonna bore some people a little bit here, but there's obviously the health benefits to working out, right? There's the obvious physical health benefits to exercise, but there's the whole community aspect of it too, which I think is sometimes overlooked. And you talk about COVID, like that to me was a big highlighting factor. Like a lot of people, again, I've said this before, but I built a home gym during COVID because I kind of had to. My gym shut down, but I eventually went back there, not really because of the workout, but because of the community. It was like, I like working out with other people. There's the competition aspect of it. There's just the sort of camaraderie aspect and the social aspect of it. That's really important. So how do you look at that in terms of TRX? Because are there TRX gyms? Like, can people go to a TRX facility, or is, you know what I'm saying? Like, is that a component of it, or will that be a component of it? And if not, how do you sort of build that true community feeling within the brand and the followers?
You're expert.
Well, I mean, look, part of where we started was the idea that, I remember vividly, I probably did 300 presentations in front of 6 to a dozen trainers in gyms during the first 3 years this company was alive, right? A backpack full of straps, set it up, and then try to win over advocates by putting the product in their hands. And while I was doing that, I realized, like, wait a minute. So trainers have a pretty significant challenge. They have to bring value to their client, and then they have to continue to deliver it over time, and people get bored. So there was this thought that like, well, wait a minute, with the suspension trainer, which then was all new, I used to use the metaphor that like this strap is like a magic wand. But in order for it to deliver its magic, I have to turn that trainer into a magician, which meant education. And then I also, as we were delivering education, we realized like being a trainer can be pretty lonely. It's actually an interesting, a lot of them are independent contractors. Some of them are employees. They're in the gym. They work long hours. And so we started to connect those folks, right, around, we became their second place, right? If you want to use like a Starbucks metaphor, we became their primary affiliation was with the place of work, although it changed. So for a lot of them, we became their primary and their place of work became their secondary because they became part of the black and yellow family, right? And then that became global. And then we started doing events. And I started to realize the power of like, wait a minute, we've really got something now because we've got all these people who have different styles of training that they come together because they like being part of the TRX community. And that then allows you to, continue to grow without having to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to project yourself, right? They become your ambassadors. And it creates a culture that then permeates out into, the regular folks at home who buy a set of straps and go home. And now what we're trying to do, because that all takes work, it doesn't happen automatically. Right? It takes real focus and deliberate work to not only create a community, but then keep it alive. And, we saw during the hard years of the company that if you don't focus on that, it will decline. But fortunately for us, ours was strong enough that it kind of hit a little speed bump and then came roaring back. And I think what we want to do now is continue to lean hard into that, to use technology to expand our reach beyond just what we used to do, which was all kind of physical events. We'll have some of those, but I think technology can give us a greater reach. And then as we build, as we're able to add value to our customers, if they're professionals, we're able to help them make more money, right? We've got some programs that we're developing right now that are going to help them break out of the pack and monetize their relationship with the company to a better end. And ultimately, that's, I think, if you keep adding value and you keep engaging your community, then it just gets stronger and stronger.
Yeah, and the comment I make about community is, oftentimes community, there's the profile of the person, right? TRX has always transcended that, although it was born out of the SEAL Team 6 and Navy SEAL community, and then trainers, athletes. And by the way, that's the sexy part of the business. So a lot of people will pay attention to that part. But if you think about the community for TRX right now, like one of my buddies, I just lost him 6 months ago, Don Gruen, was 97 years old. 97-year-old working out. The beauty with the TRX is active agers can work out using a TRX. We only have one gym, Chris, to your question. Okay. It's always been a headquarters gym. But in our community here, you can find, people in our gym, everybody doing exactly the same workout. And you can have the 22-year-old, athlete or the 78-year-old active ager, both doing the same workout. One steps in, leans in a little bit more and gets more out of it. One takes a step back, takes a little off, but everybody's doing the same workout side by side. So you talk about community. What we can do is we can have the super athletes. We just did a pre and postnatal program. We have TRX for rehab. We have TRX for active agers. It really just, it reflects the entire, the entire world. It doesn't really focus on one particular segment. Young people, older people, fit people, not so fit people. That for us, that's the part of the community, which is just getting people together to lead happy and healthy lifestyles. And wherever you are, we can help you get better.
Yeah. What do you guys think about, or do you pay attention to fads like fitness? Because this is just, it's one of the things that kind of makes me laugh. I feel like we make something way more complicated than it needs to be. And it's like fitness to me at its basic level is really not that difficult. I mean, it's difficult to do, but like to understand it is not that hard. It's like make your muscles tired, make your lungs tired, like push yourself hard, right? Don't eat crap, get good sleep. And yet we still keep coming out. Like I see the next thing that's on TV, that's some kind of the mirror or whatever, this like home workout thing. Do you guys pay attention to that stuff at all? Or is that just noise? Like, does it bother you? Does it get in the way of things? Do you have to
No,
try?
we pay close attention, but there's a difference between fads and trends, right?
Okay, good
There
point.
are fads are, let's be dismissive. Trinkets that are happy for a minute and they have a short spike and then they're off, and somebody at TikTok makes it popular, then it's gone. Those are fads. We pay attention to them, but those aren't really things that are foundational to what we do. There are trends. Trends, for example, like GLP-1s.
For sure.
Ones, cause muscle decline. And so people with that trend, people understand that functional strength is foundational to longevity, healthy living. And it's also necessary if you're going along a trend of taking GLP-1s. So there are trends that actually do matter. They're here to stay. And you want to make sure that we're able to communicate the functional strength training you do with TRX gear is the necessary component of, somebody who's going on that journey. So then there's also trends of, podcasts now like this. We can go deeper dive into issues so people become much healthier because they learn a lot more about it. There's the Huberman, Attia, Sinclair, world out there where people actually learn a lot more about what it takes to be healthy over the long term. What's happened, that's then Randy was telling the story 20 years ago. The world's now focused on bodybuilding and big muscle training. That's fun for a small group of people, but functional training is necessary for everybody. So the world, through that kind of trend, has caught on to this kind of workout is really important going forward. That's not a fad. That's a trend, and that's a secular trend. That's not just a moment in time thing.
By the way, I've always thought it's funny that we have to say that functional fitness, that term is even a thing, right? Like it's just like, because it means that other stuff is dysfunctional or non-functional. Like all fitness should be functional, right? If it's not, it's sort of like, it's just,
I think it became, it's funny because when that first started getting talked about, right as I was starting the company, and I remember hearing, Gary Gray Cook talking about, these are guys that are, big thinkers in the fitness world, inside the professional fitness world, the trainer world, and talking about functional training. And, the description really spoke to me, which was, hey, training in the training room, doing things that, either mimic or support movements that you need to do in life. And literally the first exercise that I ever kind of conjured up on the strap, which was then my jiu-jitsu belt, and some riggers webbing, was trying to create the motion of climbing a caving ladder. Yep. Right. And so that first move we call the power pole today, but it was just this simple, right? It was leaning back, lifting your weight, reaching for a run. And so that idea of, it does actually make a lot of sense to train movements, to load movements, maybe that you're going to try to perform unloaded, which is going to make you do it better. And we were so early to the movement that I was like, damn, functional training, that's kind of cool. I got on, I can't even remember what it was. It was before GoDaddy. I got on, looked up functionaltraining.com. There it was, bought it for like $12. And we've owned functionaltraining.com ever since. That's how early we were to the movement. And we've had it forward to our website, right? And the idea, though, was a great point. It was, hey, train movements that you need in life rather than just train hypertrophy for the sake of hypertrophy, right? If you need to be built like a bull for something that you're going to do, you're going to be a lineman, great. Then train for that, right? But if you don't, which most people don't, then train functionality that's going to make you live a longer, healthier life. And that's I've also said, small tools, big movements is another way that I like to think about it, right? It's not necessarily big, heavy tools with small movements. There's a place for that, but there's also a place for small tools with big movements.
But think about the education that comes along with it. I think back to being a kid in Pittsburgh with Bam Bam, working out in the gym, doing 5 exercises with as much weight as we possibly could, few reps, and then waiting in between, and then doing it again, working on a couple of big muscles to impress the girls. Like, oh my God, how much time we waste in the gym doing that,
Yeah.
right? Come up, make the system all work
Yeah.
together.
It's
Maybe you
still
could-
it's still fun occasionally. I still do a bro sesh from now and again. You know, like
Right.
it's not my
Old
main
school.
thing, but it's kind of fun to still go do that. I do it with my son now. My oldest son, he's all into lifting now, so I'm like, yeah, I'll go do a bro sesh with you. It's fun.
I remember we were at a trade show this years ago, and Jay Cutler came up.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, a giant hunk of meat, and got on the straps and started telling me, like, this is why I need this. And he was talking about leakage, power leakage, right? And he's like, I don't do enough of the training to hold these big muscles together. And that's why I need this set of these straps to train, and we were like, take them, right? And he went out and ended up, introducing a lot of people to TRX. But it was a great kind of validation for me. It's like, this dude throws around some weight, and he's over here thinking that these straps fill in gaps that otherwise he has a harder time filling in, right? And so that's where TRX became, hey, whatever you like to do is great. We just want to be part of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, a funny SEAL story about my introduction to TRX. First person to mention TRX to me was in 2014, Colin Kilrain.
Oh, yeah.
We were in Normandy for the 70th anniversary of D-Day, hanging out with our families. And here you have Navy SEAL Admiral Colin Kilrain, Olympic quality wrestler. We're going out in the backyard to work out. And he brings these straps out there, and we're going out. I said, "What are we doing?" He goes, "Oh, let's go work out." I'm looking around for the weights, and he has his bag, a duffel bag. He throws the duffel bag down, pulls out a suspension trailer, and I look at him. I go, "You come on, right?" And he looks and he goes, "Oh, you're such an idiot." Throws them over a tree, and says, "Okay, low rows, do 15." And I'm like, "This is ridiculous. This is not going to be." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is something else." First time I ever got my hands on straps, right?
Well, I took so we were at the gym. I'll tell a quick story too. We were at the gym the other day. Again, I was doing a bro sesh with my oldest son because he's into lifting now. So it's fun and it's good kind of father-son bonding time. I'm going to embarrass him a little bit, but we were doing some other stuff, and I was like, hey, in between, let's do some push-up. There's TRX. There's suspension trainers hanging over. There's a like a pull-up bar where there's a bunch of them hanging there in the gym, and I'm like, do just a max set of push-ups on those in between, like as a kind of superset type thing. So I get on and I do whatever it is. He couldn't do one, like, and he can do plenty of push-ups and bench press and everything. He's like, I can't even do one. I'm like, okay, good. That's something you can work on, right? There's some balance associated with that makes it a lot harder than a regular push-up. So
You made him a magician. You can pull out those magic tricks every once in a while. You ever want.
You could have charged him for the privilege.
I think just getting back to kind of the entrepreneurial thing, and like I said, Randy, I didn't want you to have to go through your whole story with because I know you've told that a gazillion times and it's on tons of other podcasts. But just over the course of this 20-year, from both of your perspectives, I don't know what it is, like top 2 or 3 biggest lessons learned from like an entrepreneur's journey, from a business journey, like Jack, you looking from the outside in, some person out there that's, whether they're a veteran or somebody else, and they're either about to start a company, they've got an idea, or they're midstream with like a fledgling business out there. The biggest things that you would tell them, the watch outs, or the like, hey, don't make this mistake, or whatever it may be. What would those be?
Well, I'll give a few for the bootstrapper, right? Because that's where I spent a lot of my, my career. I mean, first, like, if you are solving, if your product or service is solving a problem, you're going to be way, way, way better off than if you're trying to do a thing that, doesn't necessarily have a clearly articulated problem that it's solving. And the reason is because you solve a problem and the broader held the problem is, the more the market pulls you into it. And so it's always like a good moment to stop and ask yourself, like, is what we're doing solving a real problem? And if it's not clear, then you got to really think about, okay, well, how am I going to communicate to, the world why they should buy this thing? Because copying something else, unless it's a fundamental improvement on prior art, you're gonna have a hard time. Like, nobody buys a product because it's marginally better than something else, or I should say somebody might, but not enough people to build a business. So that's kind of one thing. And then another one, and I've learned this the hard way, is that there's nothing wrong with good, steady, authentic growth, profitable growth, right? If you can get profitable as quickly as possible and then grow within your ability to either stay completely profitable or, make very calculated small bets without having to take on a bunch of leverage or take on a bunch of external capital, that's a great way to build the business. Because when you don't do that, right, you can get yourself in positions where the business isn't nearly as fun as it might have been. And, sometimes people will take on capital. We started the conversation with this, right? You hear people, oh, this company raised all this money. That actually isn't really a sign of strength. It's really kind of a sign of like, well, why did they need to take on all that excess capital? Because if they were really strong, they wouldn't have to take on any, or they could take on a little to make a calculated bet, because you make better decisions from a point of profitability rather than, getting yourself behind a nut that you now have to pay back and time's ticking away. And, you end up having a lot more fun, I think, when you're in a business that's making money. So those are two things for early stage folks that I would really encourage them to think about. And we already talked about, if you are going to raise money, some of the considerations that you need to make sure that you're taking the right kind of money from the right kind of investor, and with a shared timeline and a shared vision of what the return's going to be. Those are a few that I see guys make those mistakes all the time, and I've made it myself.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Jack,
maybe
what about you?
From my perspective, and I'll put it in perspective on your audience, the Navy SEAL community, which, because I grew up with Bobby Smith, I've known so many people from your community. It's I'm fortunate that way. But I think, so a team, you guys know all about teamwork, but it's really having that network of people that you can actually communicate with. Don't hold it in. Don't be stoic about it. Communicate what your objectives are, and seek out a buddy saying, hey, I got this going on. Can you take a look, and can you give me your advice or guidance? Like having that kind of comfort to be also vulnerable. Hey, I really don't know what I'm doing, or I have lots of questions about this. And seeking out counsel from people through your network is really important. But there's a positioning side of it, and then there's a vulnerability side of it, right? Have that community of people around you, have that team of people around you, but be able to listen, be able to prompt, and then sit back and listen and take counsel and take guidance and action it. So I think that's one that's really important from my perspective. And then the second is also relative to a lot of people in your community, career pivots, right? Now, I've never done the dramatic pivot of what you guys do for a living to something else, but I went from young professor entrepreneur to Wall Street guy to fitness entrepreneur, right? And each one of those significant changes, there's a way to go about that. There's a stepping out, deciding, okay, I want to go. You don't just jump in head first. You're thoughtful about it. You take some steps. You get yourself prepared. You start off bottom rung. Don't go in, you were great at this world, so automatically you have to be at the same standing in the new world. You have to subordinate yourself. You have to listen. You have to give yourself time to really develop. And that's something that gets harder for us to do the older we get. And the more we're, locked in our ways, we don't want to subordinate ourselves, right? I think with those career pivots, it's a necessary part of going on the journey, because you can't accelerate into certain things. Wisdom doesn't come quickly, right? If you're a quick study, you could pick up on things. There are things I'll never be as wise about this industry as Randy will, but I have Randy, right? So I will continue to grow, but I'll also lean on him, and I'll listen to what he has to say and the wisdom and guidance that he gives me. And that's the substitute for me.
And oh, do I wish I had Jack when I was looking at some of these deals and deal terms, right, that people were presenting to TRX early on, right? Because, man, I mean, what a wealth of experience and knowledge. So, I mean, really putting together, I mean, it's honestly, it is like a team, and the teams, it's putting together the complementary skill sets and really reaching out for that. I agree. It's critical. You asked for one of the mistakes that specifically for people coming from the military that I made. And I think it's worth mentioning that I kind of made the assumption that anybody that I was talking to was like the guys that I was used to working with. They would never, number one, they say they're going to do something, they're going to burn themselves to the ground. Even if they don't get it done, it's going to be because they completely cratered into a smoldering hole of effort, not because they decided not to do it. That is not always the case on the outside, right? And that's something that really bit me over and over and over. And it took me a while to, I hate to say, like, kind of dumb down your expectations, because you can find amazing people on the outside to partner with, right? But it is something to keep your eyes open if you're making a transition. Not everybody has the level of, dedication, drive. I mean, fortunately, like, they're out there, right? You can find them, but it's rare. It's not, that goes as common and taken for granted inside the teams or other, the special force, special ops units, or just, I think, in the general military. There's a level of commitment that is different. And so you got to be a little bit aware of that, because that bit me up the ass multiple times, right? Just kind of having my guard down and taking things at face value.
Yeah.
That probably should have been a little bit more skeptical.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I experienced the same thing. It's different. It's not a one for one when you get out. I mean, there's things that transfer over, principles and whatnot. But yeah, it is a different environment. So, well, let's kind of wrap it up, guys. Because you got to give that room over in a few minutes here. So, just for listeners out there, especially ones that like have never had any involvement with TRX, like they've never used one of the trainers, they've never, like, where are you going to send them? Where should they go to kind of check more out, and where should they start in that ecosystem?
I'd say it's trxtraining.com, or wherever you buy your fitness gear. Pick up a suspension trainer, jump on our app. That is really a great way to do it. And then the other is, you'll find us at the Orange Theories of the world. You'll find us at, Anytime Fitness. You'll find us at, you pick your gym of choice, and you can always find trainers through our website. There are local trainers available. And you can always reach out to us. We'll hook you up.
Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an IRONCLAD original series sponsored by Mechanicswear. Learn more at NavySEALFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104. Please like, share, subscribe, and if you have a question or feedback, drop it in the comments. See you next time.